I hope it looks good for a setting.
Is that like the real window with real trees?
Yeah,
It looks like I don't know,
it's
wallpaper. It's amazing.
there's it's really out there.
Nice. Nice.
Um,
Hi, cat.
oh yeah, this is Bandit. This is one of the cats. He got really excited by the window opening. So that this is Charles.
Oh, he's gorgeous.
Oh yeah, isn't he the prettiest cat?
Yes.
And he's like extremely docile, so you can just pick him up and
Hugging friend.
yeah.
So cute. Alrighty then, let's go. Welcome to Root Cause. I'm Nunem. This is where we get to the root cause of things. Architectural decisions that aged badly, leadership transitions nobody prepares you for, and the hype cycles that keep repeating themselves. If you have ever wondered, am I crazy for questioning this? You're in the right place. Today we're talking about something every engineering team is living through right now, and almost nobody has any idea if we're doing it right. There's a certain spectrum. On one end, people who won't let AI near their code base, and on the other, people who let it write, decide, ship with barely any human in the loop. Most of us, though, are somewhere in the middle, moving around, not sure we've got it right or if it will be worth it. Today, we're going to try to gauge where the honest answer actually is. And for that, today my guest is Evan Marshall, co-founder and CTO of Ito.ai. With a background in computer science at MIT, he has over a decade of experience working with various technologies in different parts of software development. After spending 4 years building a product in the applied cryptography area, developing a privacy infrastructure and secure data management solution for zero-knowledge blockchains, he realized how dangerous things can get if quality slips. When the stakes are high, a bug isn't an inconvenience, it's a disaster. That's what pushed him towards QA. So now he builds Ito, a QA agent that actually runs your application and checks the code before it merges. Not just static analysis that reads the code, but actual execution. Evan, welcome to Root Cause, and I'm glad you've made it across the time zones.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
I'm very happy to acknowledge that Root Cause barely started, but it's already intercontinental. It's excited to see someone from the Bay Area. There's a lot of romanticizing of Bay Area around in Europe. Some of my colleagues who have been there say how special it feels to sit in a cafe and hear talk about AI and meet some of the frontier minds who work on the problems. How does it feel for you? Is it really that all you do is talk about AI over there and you're all hyper effective and more than human now?
Yeah, I definitely, even in the Bay Area, notice, different subgroups. Like San Francisco is a lot more experimental on the edge. And then as you head to Silicon Valley, south about 45 minutes, where all the big companies are, you see them focusing on very different problems. And in some ways, they're, half a year, maybe a year behind the state of the art, but they are dealing with a scale of problems. There's all different sorts of personalities, right? There's the nerds who like to get super philosophical. Is AI gonna take all our jobs and turn us into pets? And then there's a lot of startup atmosphere of, oh, how fast are you growing? You know, more of the status type people. But yeah, it is a lot of fun to feel like you're in the center of a lot of the thinking.
The buzzing. And on also from here, Bay Area made sometimes look like an echo chamber that amplifies the sound of the statement that AI is taking over humanity and it's as important as the invention of fire and some big statements like that. Um, where are you on this thoughts? Is it really like that? Does it feel like everybody's bought the idea, or are there also skeptical people around?
Yeah, I think the spectrum still exists, and in the Bay Area, you're sort of primed more to say that you're further along than you are, right? So a very popular term. I was at an event with different engineering leaders yesterday, and the new pressure it seems like on companies is to say that you have a software factory, which means that you have issues that are automatically created, automatically implemented, and verified, and then merged to production with human on the loop. So humans who are monitoring at a high level, but are completely distanced from the code. People like to use metrics like what percentage of your code is AI generated, which is a weird metric because I think very few developers are handwriting any code now. Most of it's happening through a prompt. So you know it- maybe number of lines per human interaction might be a better metric, but number of lines has always been a pretty bad metric. So there's a lot of pressure on companies to be forward thinking, to say that they're implementing things, to be controversial with hot takes of a lot of statements, but in reality, the actual practices that when you talk to engineers at these companies, they're maybe a little bit ahead, they're a little bit more experimental, but they still have to ship enterprise applications that are serving millions to billions of users, right? And that's going to add a lot of constraints.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, there are a lot of different, anecdotal sort of statements of how much AI has increased the speed from 1 or 2% to 1000x. I usually say 20% for myself, but that's just a number out of the thin air. I don't have any evidence of how much AI has increased my productivity. Do you have a number in your head? Do you have a feeling of how much it has increased your productivity?
Yeah, for me personally, I think that you know maybe 50% plus. I think the biggest it's definitely not quite like it's hard to judge, right? Because what happens is you also spend a lot more time exploring things. Like you build a prototype, you build something, and then you just throw it away. And all of these kind of ideas that you have about what you should build, it's way easier to explore them. But in terms of actually shipping things, I don't think personally I'm quite at double. But that's because I don't think code generation was ever 50% of my job. So if you have,
Exactly.
a process and you can say, okay, if code generation's free, well, if it was 50%, the most you could be is double, right? And then the
Mm-hmm.
bottleneck moves somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's funny, I also was yesterday on an event by AWS, an AI symposium, and the talk there was exactly describing this spectrum and putting companies into a level of different levels of adoption of AI, starting from no AI. I just copy paste the result from ChatGPT and up to what you called software factory with every different agents, different personified agents running and implementing features end to end. And I think the more examples we bring, the easier will be for people to see whether and when AI is really making a difference. Do you have some concrete examples of how you use it? Do you have this kind of software factory already, or are you just building it?
Yeah. So there's kind of two main pieces where we use AI. Because we're an AI company, we have it both as a core part of our product, and then we have our own engineering practices. On our own engineering practices, everything is still gated by a human verification in terms of a human makes the final decision if something gets merged. But we have maybe 10% of our issues get automatically implemented, iterate with code review that's done agentically. And that you basically slap a label on an issue and you get a PR that's already been iterated, has feedback, has screenshots, has logs, and you can see the API requests and the database queries that are impacted. But we still have a human glance over it to kind of judge whether or not that's ready to go. In our actual product, we do have sort of like real software factory where our product does QA, so it operates on our customers' code bases, and we generate code that makes it easier for our agents to operate. And we have evals that make it, help us judge, is a new tool or a change to their tools making them more effective. And that is
So,
more, yeah.
so sort of categorizing the kind of the change?
No, more so like really simple examples like a SQL script for seeding data, where a lot of companies don't maintain a really great SQL script for seeding data, right? So that's something that it often will automatically generate. So it can choose which types of things to generate, but often that it'll generate something like a seeding script so that when it's operating on a pull request, it already has a lot more data, and then it can have a vectorized memory layer to essentially already know how to like what's in the database, what's there. So every single time it runs, it doesn't have to like reseed the database from
So it
scratch.
creates an artifact for itself for later to use.
Yeah, it's out of the loop. So it's out of the core PR cycle. Like after we run on a PR, then we have this you know, other loop that will run afterwards and say, yeah, in batches, and say, okay, what problems, did the agent have, what work did it have to do? How could it have been faster? How could it have set up the environment faster? And then it will generate code to do that. And then that code will be tested on runs as if it had those, for some sample set. And then if it improves the evaluation, then it kind of gets merged into the tool set for future runs.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned loops. I assume you also have certain skill sets that help you inside the software factory, and a bunch of MCPs, and also good instructions to how to use those MCPs. What are other maybe elements of that software factory that are important to note?
Yeah, it really depends on your goal, right? The one term I sort of use to describe AI coding is we're sort of in the plastic age of coding, where before everything was made out of concrete and metal, and it was heavy and took a long time, but it was durable, right? And now we're in the plastic age where you can generate code literally to be thrown away.
Yes, Charity had an article recently where she mentioned that code has become disposable, and that changes things from treating it as a precious, clean, wonderful piece of creation that we used to maybe treat it sometimes, into something that you can afford to throw away. One challenge that I see, especially for companies that build products in this space, is that we sort of both build the infrastructure around the agents to aid us to build the software, and then we also build the software. And I think that also takes a lot of time to build the infrastructure around the agents to produce high quality code. Do you see a possibility there to standardize this, to productize this, the whole software factory, or is it going to stay individual?
Yeah, I think there are some productization efforts happening. You first see the vibe coders and the individuals who have way fewer constraints kind of lead the way in terms of experimentation. So you have the Oh My agent, where you have named agents like Prometheus who are delegating, and it's this kind of fun world of imagining, if you look into, Gas Town with like polecats and this whole factory idea. um, that's sort of the first experimental attempts for a software factory, but then you have real companies who are trying to implement it. And I don't think there's been any company that has captured the plug and play software factory, and it's tough because every factory looks different. In reality, I think if you think about it like plastic, it's going to appear in a lot of places, but not everything's going to be made out of plastic.
Yeah, that's an interesting comparison. I compare it more with like CI/CD pipelines. Of course, there are tools that help you build CI/CD pipelines, but then eventually it's quite individual for your software. What parts of the where do you need to run more tests? Where do you need to focus more? Which step produces artifacts or doesn't? How are they versioned? Whatever. Those kind of questions stayed sort of company specific when they were building CI/CD pipeline. And I think if you build a workflow with agents, those are also going to be somewhat individual. But we'll get more frameworks that are better at some of those steps.
Yeah, I completely agree. There are going to be frameworks, tools that are commonly used, right? Patterns that emerge. I think the strongest thing is patterns that you see, right? Where everyone has a different way of doing things, but they look similar across organizations.
And evals and verification being one of them, right? Well, how the importance of closing the loop of what the agents do, so they just don't just produce code and that's it, but you actually have a step that verifies that and the step that traces what the previous steps did, etc.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You need to measure what agents do.
Mm-hmm, let's talk about the subscription-based usage of coding agents versus API-based usage. Um, is have you switched from, let's say, subscription-based to the token-based, and how expensive that is? Because sometimes people underestimate, I think, the price of that kind of software factory, because they use a local subscription of one of the companies out there.
Yeah, the numbers I have seen is that if you have like a Codex or Claude subscription for a couple $100, you could use up to 10,000 to $20,000. Certainly thousands of dollars. There are Chinese reseller companies that will automatically manage this for you. So they will handle the sort of spoofing subscriptions and then sell an API based on that arbitrage. But yeah, we use API, for individuals, we have subscriptions, but every part of our product's on an API. So
Mm-hmm. Clearly, yeah.
yeah, so it is expensive. It can cost is I think cost is the biggest thing over the next like 6 months to a year.
Mm-hmm. What also is a topic at the moment are the open models and using open code with one of the, I don't know, GLM 5.2. Do you have experience with that? Are you using open code? Just curious.
Yeah, I actually use open code. I really like it. Also, our product uses open code under the hood, because you need to be able to change models quickly. My daily driver generally shifts back between one of the OpenAI models and one of the Anthropic models. I think I had a couple days with Gemini for like just to try it out, but you definitely the models are switching. Who has the best model for what is switching so rapidly. I think you need a tool, preferably open source, where you can switch between them rapidly too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do you think the quality of the models will become similar? Is this race ending soon and it's becoming commodity, or do you see big increases in productivity in the models moving forward?
I think the models are going to keep getting better. There's different time horizons. Over a relatively short time horizon, it seems like the the models are plateauing. Fable is great slash Mythos, great model, wonderful, but it's less of a leap from 4.8 than looking at like GPT 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 or O1 to O3, right? A lot of the major advancements seem to be plateauing as sort of what happens is you get a new technology, everything's brand new. Oh, you just train more parameters. No one thinks bigger models are doing better, and now the companies are getting into their harnesses and fine tuning on their harnesses. So it seems like the open weight models are definitely catching up. I think GLM 5.2 is probably equivalent to Opus 4.5, 4.6.
Hmm. Which also naturally brings forward the importance of exactly agent orchestration and creation of pipelines and verifiability of their actions. Um, I'm hearing some companies when you pitch a product that, let's say, um, makes usage of AI more easy, like for example a QA agent from your side or an SRE agent from my side. The high level response or the first wave of responses is, well, I can do the same with Claude Code. Um, I know that these people will hit problems. Basically, where do you think the importance is now once the models themselves plateau, as you said? What are some things that will make it not as easy as, well, I'll just use Claude Code?
Yeah. So we look at the basic of our core trio of values is speed, quality, and cost. So these are the metrics that we track, and we spend a lot of time improving these metrics. So I think that you could probably build anything you wanted agentically, but you would be worse in substantially in at least a couple of these metrics. So I think the selling argument for a lot of companies is, well, you could build it, but it would take you a lot of money and a lot of time iterating and trying to get a competitive product, right? And for some scale of organization, it makes sense. Google's going to build their own thing. right? But for a lot of organizations, you have to ask, is this your priority as an organization? Do you want to have some of your best AI engineers, you know, taking off whatever they're working on, improving your product, adding agentic capabilities to your business? Or do you want them to, how many people on your team do you want dedicated to DevOps? So there's definitely always that build versus buy. I never thought in software there was any piece of software that was truly magical that you couldn't imagine building yourself, right? And I think the same is true today. It's just people have spent, we spent the tokens so you don't have to.
Yeah, that's a nice statement. I'm gonna steal that. But where exactly do you see the bottlenecks that they will hit? For example, knowledge organization, memory management, some concrete things that they don't see before they start implementing these kind of tools.
Yeah. So in verification, the first thing is setting up the environment where uh, Ito will provision the environment agentically. So we use dev containers under the hood. So we containerize everything and then wire up the containers to be able to talk to each other. And then the agent has the full ability to modify and control any, specific piece of that. Um, Getting that to work reliably is tough. It is a really deep, hard problem, and you need that to be self-healing. It's not just something you run once. It's something that someone, you have different, and it's also really slow, right? So the first thing you got to do is get that working. The next piece is you have to make it self-healing because you don't want manual intervention or some issue being filed. Then you're going to say that's slow. So you need to implement caching. But caching has its own problems. What if someone pushes a migration on one of their branches? Well, you have to invalidate that layer of the cache, right? But there's still other layers that you can use. So it just ends up, exploding in complexity. And you could follow our path and address all of those problems and build pipelines and steps, and handling and graceful fallbacks and caches to speed things up. Um, but and then you build in a memory layer, then you build in a software factory layer to make that easier. Then there's the cross organizational knowledge where if we have familiar setting up one stack, it gives us memories to set up similar stacks that use similar tooling. So it's a lot of work. It's a ton of work. I don't think that there's anything like completely defensible where if someone wants to dedicate millions of dollars and many months to building that, but as a company, we're continuing to invest millions of dollars, right, to make ours better. And what we're seeing with a lot of companies is you could do that, but you would spend more money on tokens than you would just paying our subscription.
Somebody listening to your product description might say, well, I'm a QA, will I be replaced? And from the management side, there will be, why don't I give my QA a Claude Code subscription? That will be enough than buying your tool. What do you say to both of those people?
I think things evolve, right? And I I don't think AI right now is anywhere good enough to replace people in terms of is it I like to imagine it's not going to kill everyone. I imagine, we'll be turned into pets and we can live in like the Star Trek universe, but in terms of it's not there. But where it is today is a massive productivity tool. So if you use a productivity tool or if you don't use a productivity tool and other people do, then that's going to be your disadvantage. So I do think there are people who lean too heavily on it, right? And that's also an issue, right? But I wouldn't worry so much about getting replaced as evolving with the times, right? I'm sure there was someone who was like the fastest like punch card ever back when we used punch cards for programmers, and he was like, you know, is like so good at like punching the holes in the cards, and that person was probably pretty upset when that was obsoleted. But things evolve, right? I've been programming for 15 years, and it's been evolving the whole time. Mobile was, a whole new thing that people had to figure out. The web used to be static HTML pages, and then you had, you know, some JavaScript, and then like jQuery, and then you had this like spaghetti, like this, callback hell, and then someone's like,
Yeah.
here's like Bootstrap and Angular, right? And then it's like, no, you got to be using React. React's this
React.
great, cool thing, but should you be using Vue, right? So the tool set is always evolving. I think this is just another tool.
Mm-hmm. And you brought up Star Trek, and I just realized we've built a replicator, but only for code for now.
Yeah. I mean, people are looking at robotics pretty heavily, but
All right.
it feels at least 5 years behind where code is.
Yeah, but you hope for a replicator, right? Where you just say, "Give me, I don't know, chocolate mousse," and it will print it one for you.
Yeah, I think just what would be, I don't like doing chores, and it'd be cool if there was like, something to wash the dishes and, do the laundry. Which is kind of funny to say because I already have laundry machines and a dishwasher, but I have to like put them in and take them out, right? So uh, we already have a lot of automation, but kind of closing the gap so you don't have to think about some things. There are some companies that are doing this, but they're, they're like robots controlled by people wearing VR headsets.
Yeah, it's similar to the self-driving car companies, but there is a step between self-driving and I know there are companies that like people sit in VR glasses, drive the car in instead of self-driving. So it's apparently a step between completely doing it on your own as a human and completely doing it in a non in an automated way. So there's a step where there's a person in VR controlling all of that.
Yeah, and self-driving cars, right, do exist. Crazy thing is it's more expensive right now, at least. Like in San Francisco, you get a Waymo um, and drive somewhere, but it's more expensive, and it also isn't quite as convenient because it feels like there are some roads it's not allowed on, so it usually takes you on a slower path. And then it also usually doesn't like pick you up right where you are. It like makes you walk a little bit to a spot where it feels more comfortable. So it's really cool. It's a real experience, right? The first time you're in a self-driving car. But the vast, vast majority of cars that I see on the road are still human controlled. I just think these changes take a lot of time. But over long term, yeah.
Yeah, and they take a lot of time, and also as with any product, when they hit the reality, it turns out that the problems that the tools expected to happen are different from the problems that they actually hit. People use it differently. As you said, there are roads where it's now not allowed, so it takes a longer route. I don't think these were initially expected. These are things that just come out when the product hits reality.
Yeah. Someone sticks a traffic cone on the hood of the Waymo you're in, and now it stops and
Yeah.
won't move. So it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it,
What's with 3D printing? I mean, I've never gone too deep into the topic, but at least I always thought when it first came out that at some point everybody would have a 3D printer and just print, I don't know, forks and stuff for themselves. Is it still because it's too expensive?
yeah,
I
the
don't know if you are in the
replicator.
topic. I'm still
Yeah,
thinking about it.
yeah. It's I think it's all a matter of cost,
Hmm.
right? Where 3D printing is great for certain requirements, but if you're doing, if you're trying to compare it to the cost efficiency of injection molding,
Hmm.
um,
True.
it's completely different, right? So there's always going to be a lot of ways to do something, and they're going to be useful. And 3D printing is really cool. I think it's awesome. It's come a long way. You get a bunch of different materials. Some people are, the 3D printing houses, but yeah, in general, right, it comes down to cost, and there's probably a cheaper way to print something than a little nozzle moving around, millimeter by millimeter.
So, yeah, I guess similar with coding and AI, and the sanity of usage of AI should be exactly there where you feel it is taking you longer with AI rather than not. And so far, simply generating um, code is cheaper, but then building a product with those Lego pieces that you now have is not necessarily cheaper, and that's why SaaS is not dead. There's still gonna be companies who specialize in a certain kind of product.
Yeah, everyone has all sorts of different needs and constraints. I it's really too early to know what the future looks like, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially because AI does feel like a bubble in the sense that there is a lot of overinvestment. There is a lot of, trillion-dollar companies are losing tens of billions of dollars. Something doesn't feel correct about that. Um, but there's real value there. There's undeniably real value. So I think it's a question of how do you play in the regions of true value instead of more, speculative use cases. Um, But yeah, I mean, that's what people are gonna experiment all over the place. Some people are gonna be spending, like at Anthropic, employees spend 50K a month per employee
Oh,
on tokens. I don't think that that's the right place. I think if you're probably pretty AI forward as a company and you have like a real business, you're probably somewhere in the low thousands. And I think if you're reasonably putting in good effort, you're probably in the hundreds of dollars, maybe like $500 a month. I
yeah,
think
if you
that's
have
probably,
optimized it.
yeah, I think that's probably a good range is somewhere from like 500 to $2,500.
That's a nice gauge for people to evaluate their usage. Um, if we come back to AI in development lifecycle, if now some team is listening to this, a manager or just a member of a team, and they want to start integrating AI effectively into their SDLC, what would be your advice to them?
You have to think about the whole the whole SDLC. It is not just one piece. If you have an optimization problem, you look at the biggest bottleneck, you fix it, and then you move on to the next bottleneck, right? You fix that. If code generation is free, let's say before it was half your time and now it's 0% of your time, it's all free. Well, your SDLC at most can be twice as fast, right? So you have to ask, what are the other bottlenecks we see? And right now, the biggest bottleneck is verification and quality control, where it's very fast to generate code. It's very expensive to feel good about it, right? To trust it. So I think there's a lot of different tooling. I think we're building a really great component of that. I think there's other tooling that needs to be integrated as well. But really, I would look at it as an optimization process where it's not just generating code. There's a lot of other pieces to the job that are going to become the bottlenecks once you integrate, more coding agents.
Shipping it, testing it, all the stuff that was actually the hard part always.
Yeah, I mean, monitoring observability is really hard, automatically triaging things, um, and then staying really close to your product. How do
Hmm.
you, if you're moving further away from the code, which I think is fair to say that software is a process forever of moving further away from hardware, right? More layers of abstraction are added, and we got a new layer, and we're further from the hardware than ever, because the CPU isn't running C, right? Um, so like no one looks at assembly anymore, and you're not punished for not looking at your assembly, and no one's looking at like the C code that Python generates, really. So as
Which is
you
most
move,
likely not optimal.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think there's still a world for a few people to like really optimize it, but that how do you stay close to your product, right? As you get further away from the hardware and the business logic that's actually implemented, how do you stay really close to it so you don't lose track of the ball?
This is some sane advice. um, we have this tradition of a question from a previous guest, and I think you got a difficult one. This is from Barry O'Reilly. He is the author and creator of residuality theory. It's a quite interesting thing if you haven't checked it out. But basically, he asked that if you would be sent back to 1822 with Charles Babbage and Anna Lovelace in one room, and I think this fits really well to your assembly and C++ talk, would you be able to help them build a computer?
Not really. I mean, I think I could solve some problems, trying to, pull on the undergrad education, but I think, my first goal would be to not be burned as a witch.
Hmm.
just like blend
I know.
in,
Yeah, true.
just blend in a little bit, survive. But you could probably help a lot, but even if you gave someone the correct answer, right? If you gave them and you told them exactly how things would work, and you could remember enough of the details to put it together coherently, acceptance of knowledge and consensus around that acceptance is very tricky, right?
Do you think we have evolved as a society in acceptance of knowledge from those
I
times?
think it's
I mean, we're not
evolutionary.
burning people, but we're still very, very angry to people expressing their opinions.
Yeah, I don't want to go into politics, but I think it's it's a tricky time for facts and for consensus and for knowledge and a shared reality. I think it's a really tricky time right now for people having a shared reality. Um, So I think that's always been true in human history. And I think you could, give someone uh, an answer, but why would they believe you? Right.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of my previous guests, she said that the most rebellious thing you can do is learn. And I think learning and critical thinking is one of the most important things you can learn. And you can learn that by comparing information, to comparing outlets, thinking for yourself, um, so that you have your own understanding of reality.
Yeah. I I think social media is an absolute cancer. So just like especially the ones where it's like personal, where you're seeing everyone else's highlights, and like Instagram is just, I think, if you could be a lot happier and a lot smarter if you just like go out into the world and talk to people. Um, the What you see online is this massive conflict and the so much anger and chaos. And then you go into the real world, like most people you could do in real life are genuine, kind people who would help a stranger.
This is exactly why I'm having these conversations, because you read crazy claims, you read into the hype, and you start going crazy yourself. And then you sit with someone for an hour and you actually have a conversation, and it turns out everything is fine. Humanity is still humanity. And I heard the other day the paradox of a good person. You know that one? It's that bad person, let's say evil person who doesn't want to do any good, in their arsenal they have all the tools that a good person has, and plus they have no moral compass. They can do whatever they want, so they have additional tools at their hand that a good person wouldn't have. And if you continue this thought, that would mean that everybody should be an evil person because they would take over the world. But the reality is that there are good people. There are people who help each other out. And so I'm happy we're living in that paradox.
Well, yeah, I don't agree with that being a paradox either. I think people who cooperate can do more than people who take and steal and hurt each other.
Hmm.
And I don't like, if you there's some documentary that's just like the life cycle of a ballpoint pen, of all the different components being, from the ore that becomes like the iron and smelt, and like every piece of the supply chain coming together to make like a pen, right? And the level of cooperation is crazy, right? The whole world is cooperating to make pens, right? Someone's mining oil in some country, and someone's growing wheat so that they can feed the workers and other. It's like the whole world is cooperating to make a pen. And I, you get on a plane. Do you know how anything works? Like, you got the basic idea of lift. It's like air goes,
Yeah.
faster over than so it pushes it up. But um, I think the world is society is a shining example of cooperation. Not perfect, but it's we depend daily on living the decisions, that someone took their time with that bridge you drive over every day. And I think modern society is a shining example of cooperation, right? And What's the difference? Humans are 250,000 years old, right, as a species.
Hmm.
Only like the last like 10,000 years have been interesting. What was the difference? Like what happened, right? Cooperation, agriculture, forming cities, maybe the discovery of alcohol played into that.
Yeah, yeah. I love the positive tone of the ending of the episode. The first question, before I ask you for the question for the next guest, we also run usually recommendations of books, or I feel you are a documentary person, maybe some documentaries you can recommend that have shaped you as a software engineer, let's say, or your way of thinking about humanity.
Yeah, I think in the AI theme, there's a lot of sci-fi that kind of comes up. I really like the Bobiverse series.
You're
It's
the second person recommending me that.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's like a Van Neumann machine idea. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I think there's like 5 or 6 books, something like that. Not too crazy. The Dungeon Crawler Carl is just a fantastic series. Where if you it's not so, it's a little bit of AI, but honestly it's just like if you like lit RPG, it's just kind of candy. It's not intellectually
I
stimulating, but it's like,
I'm not gonna I'm not gonna pick up any more lit RPG. It's like you can't put it down. It's doing something to your brain that you want to read more and more and more of it.
Harry Potter. So there um there was a professor who rewrote Harry Potter as if it was logical. So it's called Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality, and it is fairly lengthy. I read it on a website, which was insane, but it was very long. But the core idea was that instead of uh, having Harry as this like person who grew up in an abused household, right, where his aunt and uncle were abusing him, he's living under the stairs. He was put with his aunt, and his aunt married someone who was a professor at Oxford and taught him philosophy and how to think rationally about things. And if you like Harry Potter, it is a really cool way to kind of re-examine that universe where like when really early when Harry goes to, Green he's like, well, what's the price of gold? And he's like, oh, it's like 30 pieces of silver. And it's like, well, does that change? Is there a market? And he's like, no, it's always, and he's like, well, there's an arbitrage opportunity with the muggle markets. I could go. Yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah, I wanted to ask if he still becomes a magician or he just goes into science then
Well, then he approaches like magic very
with science.
scientifically. Like
That's
he's
nice.
like, okay, if I try the spell like this versus like this, like and he's like measuring everything.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I love that approach. So, what's your question to the next guest?
I like the question of the historical context, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
also thinking like more into the future. Um, I'd say, when are we going to get a robot? Like everyone has a phone, right? Everyone has a car. There are certain pieces of like technology that become widely ubiquitous. Um, it seems like if humanity keeps going another 1,000 years, everyone will have a robot friend. When are we going to get a robot? What I want to know.
Yeah, I want to know that too. I really think of having a co-host, a robot that always asks provocative questions because I'm a very like nice and soft person who doesn't usually ask provocative questions. So I thought I'll have a little mean co-host robot who would go extra mile. All right, thanks a lot. I enjoyed this conversation tremendously. Yeah, thanks for being honest and being here.
I really appreciate your time. Thanks for having me.
So that was Evan Marshall, co-founder and CTO of Ito.ai, someone who went looking for where quality breaks and decided to build there. If you have ever been feeling that the speed of all of this is too high and you're quietly wondering whether you're standing in the right place on the spectrum, I think this conversation gave you a better way to gauge it. Find Evan at Ito.ai, and if this made you think, send it to a person on your team who keeps shipping faster than anyone can review or is too worried to even start using AI. I'm Nune, and let's keep root causing it. Alrighty, we have it.